The NBA stretch run means playoff races galore, and whatever the hell this is at the bottom of the Eastern Conference. Never before in the association's 5-year history of play-in ball has a race been so depressing, with the 10th seeded Bulls currently on pace for 50 losses. It's not just that Chicago has no business playing postseason basketball. After all, a 34-48 Spurs team made the play-in just 3 years ago, and 50-loss teams would occasionally make the playoffs proper in the old days, when 2/3 of the league made it. It's that this year's play-in race is being contested by a bunch of teams who literally don't want to be there. All right, maybe the Bulls want in. The East Play-in tournament is basically the Arturas Karnisovas Invitational after all. But do they really, after finally signaling an intention to rebuild with the Zach LaVine trade? Meanwhile, the disappointing Sixers shut Joel Embiid down for the season and want to keep their top 6 protected pick. The Nets, one of this season's supposed tankers, are in the thick of it, well, 18 games under 500. And the 13th place Raptors have their lottery-obsessed fans panicking because a 19-42 record is somehow not bad enough to have them buried in this joke of a conference. Look, I know it'll never happen given the play-in is a scheduled component of the league's annual TV package, but for the good of the product and all the teams involved, I'm begging you, just send all these pretenders home and figure something else out. And with that, welcome to the Unfiltered Show from the Score Studios. My name is Joseph Casciaro. Guests in studio today, JD Bunkis of the JD Bunkis podcast, Vivek Jacob of Sportsnet, and the Raptors in 7 Substack. Guys, what's going on?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm all right, other than having to watch teams 10 through 13 in the East contest this god-awful race. We want to call it a race?
I gotta tell you, it's really thought-provoking, though. Like, in a time where genuinely, like, the NBA has all of these horrific narratives, like, this is supposed to be the time of the year where you pivot to, like, okay, there's exciting races and there's standings, and you're right. Like, I'm sure you guys feel the exact same way. Whenever the Raptors win a basketball game right now, I'm just like, oh, God, no, please don't let this continue. Find a way to lose.
It is insane that you still have to feel like that, even though they're 23 games under 500. Like, you would think they've done enough, for lack of a better term.
Well, and there's a case for them to actually be in the play-in game because you'd be able to try to, like, solicit some information from a team that you didn't get a ton of information from this year.
And I guess the hope, if that were to happen, would be you're like last year's Hawks. You make the play-in, you'll lose in the play and still win the lottery.
Yeah.
You talk about resolving the issue. I do think there maybe at some point has to be a conversation about the 10th seed, the 9th seed needing to be within a certain number of games of each.
Like the first year they did it in the pandemic year.
Yeah, exactly. And so whether that's 4 games, whatever it might be, like, I think there has to be an eligibility quotient to it where you can't have a team that's like 10 games out of 8th, all of a sudden, in a single elimination game, being able to put, a team in 8th out.
Yeah, no, it's nuts. And again, like, I get it. The NBA will always say, well, it's like, they're not going to tell the networks, well, you might have a play-in game this year, but you might not. They're obviously, like, can't do anything about it. Because I was even thinking, like, okay, even if you can't have them be within a certain amount of 8th, should there be, like, a cutoff where it's like, you have to win at least 35 games or something? But again, that still leaves the possibility that there's not a 9-10 play-in. So then I started thinking, would you guys ever support something like, or here in Canada, the CFL style crossover? Like, if the 10th place in the West is better than 10th place in the East, would you ever support something like that?
No, you can't do that because if you looked at how do you re-slot the team if they win?
Right.
Like, all of a sudden you'd have teams trying to game the system going, well, the Eastern Conference is weaker this year. Like, why don't we drop out of the spot? I think that this kind of speaks to actually a little bit of sports and the difficulty with some of modernity where it's just not the same. Like, we don't have the same appetite as normal fans for this much, and yet the leagues are not ever willing to sacrifice any short-term money for the long-term gain of the product. Like, we already see this with an 82-game schedule. Nobody wants it. It's so clear and obvious that it's the easiest fix for so many of the NBA's ills, right? Like, remove some games. Get this thing down to 66 games. God, get it down to 72 games. Anything, for the love of God. Remove a few of them. And then you got to go to ownership and TV holders and say, hey, we got to remove some of this content from your programming. Hey, we got to remove some of these ads or these sales from your stadiums. And they're going, yeah, we're never doing that. And you look at this play-in game, and it's kind of a similar thing. This would have been a very easy thing to predict with the play-in. And why I can say that with definitiveness is that surely all of us had this exact conversation. Like, what is the appetite for a 10 seed in the NBA to be in a playoff format that already feels like the first round doesn't matter because we know who the teams are that can compete for a title. I get that the NBA is trying to become this league of parity, even though I think the more we're seeing of this, the more we're realizing that this is actually kind of not the way that this league is at its best. But I think that they've kind of trapped themselves here. Like, what are you going to do? You're not giving up on this product. Ownership in the league is not going to want to give up on this revenue. But I cannot for the life of me imagine, like even the most diehard basketball fan, like a Chicago Bulls fan going and sitting around with his buddies and saying, bro, playing in a few weeks, like it's not happening. Yeah. It's not a conversation. And so all it ends up being is this weird product that is essentially just for owners and the enrichment of players, which I don't think we care about as fans anymore.
I'll say this. The play-in itself, I didn't support it from the beginning, but I'm okay with the general concept of it. Like, look, if you're a 7th seed, I don't care. Like, and you have to risk maybe not making the playoffs because that's fine. Like, you're not a top 6 seed. If you don't make the playoffs, I'm not going to cry for you. I like the idea that maybe it would incentivize some teams in the bottom that traditionally would have definitely been tanking, like after the All-Star break, to maybe think, hey, we got a shot at the playoffs. Usually doesn't work like that, but I can
now
at least...
it is. It's like we're seeing it.
Right. And so, like, in those ways, and we've had some good play-in games. Like, in the West, it's great because, you know, sometimes, or a lot of times, the 10th place team in the West is really good, and we had one game make the playoffs or not between the Lakers and Warriors. Like, I think it's worked from that perspective. There just has to be some safeguards in place to, like we said, like, no one should be watching Bulls, Raptors, like both on track for 50 to 55 losses in March, thinking, oh, this is a really big game for potential postseason seeding.
Yeah, I think for me, my hot take is that with the way sports is trending, with the way it's changing, you mentioned the schedule, you mentioned, you know, maybe changing the way the play-in tournament is. I think we might be reaching a point where it might be in the best interests of basketball, of the league, to almost have like a second commissioner that is super focused just on basketball interests.
Like straight up like rules and like format.
Yeah. And so obviously, you know, the NBA has done an amazing job of globalizing the game, you know, creating all these business opportunities and maximizing the revenue. But I think we have reached this point where, you know, the basketball is being sacrificed. And I think these decisions about, hey, what's the ideal schedule look like right now? Is there really a need for back-to-backs? Is there really a need for a team that's, you know, 10 games out of a playoff spot to be playing in this play-in tournament? I think those are the types of things where if you had a separate commissioner and sort of a team around him that's saying, hey, what's the best basketball decision here? Or even if you want to go to Steve Kerr talking about, you know, there's 5-6 travels a game that are not being called. Why are we not calling travel at all anymore? Those are the things where maybe you have a basketball-focused commissioner saying, hey, this is going too far.
All right, what about that? Okay, the crossover idea, there's logistical challenges.
Yeah.
We know why they're probably not going to get rid of a plan because of the, you know, financial incentives. So what about, would you guys be all right, and do you think the league would ever hear, it's been talked about for years, scrapping conferences? So, like, you look at this season, for example, and it's like, all right, you want to keep the play-in, like 20 teams still have a shot to make the postseason, but there's no conferences. The league is seeded 1 through 30. And so if you did something like that, I think the guys have prepared a graphic for it. I don't know, we'll see it on the TV here. People watching will. But yeah, like if you had done something like that, you'd have, you know, the top 12 teams across the league, and then the play-in would be 13 through 20, and the teams that would be currently just outside of it on the bubble right now would be like Portland and San Antonio instead of Chicago and Brooklyn and Toronto and teams like that.
You know where this looks good? On that graphic, and then nowhere else, okay? So for one quick thing, I just want to say I love that idea. I think that's actually like creative, and that's something that the league should explore. The problem is that I think that idealism is always going to lose out to capitalism. And so you have that commissioner, he's coming, he's like, for the good of the game. And then at the end of it, all the suits are like, and what does it turn into dollars? Yeah. Can you turn it into the dollars right now? And he's like, well, no, but eventually it's like, no, we're taking the money now because money now is worth more money in the future. With regards to this, the conference postseason shuffle up, you guys follow college football at all? I'm very much a casual. Like, I'm not a huge college football guy.
I'm not a diehard, but I follow it.
Yeah, but like I follow enough, and I'm sitting there on a Saturday, and I want to watch some games. But the team I root for is the University of Washington, okay? So UW used to be part of the Pac-12, and it was cool to watch Pac-12 games at night and feel like, hey, there was some real rivalries that were happening here, regional rivalries. They matter. Like, If you're from Cleveland, you don't know anything about Denver or about Oklahoma City or any of these other regions. You spent your entire life as a fan being told that these regional rivalries matter. Like the other night, I'm watching the Heat-Knicks game, and I'm thinking, this still means something to me because I was raised on Heat-Knicks mattering. And there's these Knicks fans that are in the stadium, and they're like chanting for Go Knicks, and the Heat fan are getting into it. And I'm like, yeah, I like that this is like MSG South and that there is a little bit of regional friction here. And so much of these postseasons and why you want to be able to build them out and have them continue to matter is that you're capitalizing on not just the tradition, but the fact that there is regional familiarity. If you live in Philadelphia, there's a good chance that you've been to Boston. You know what their sports culture is like. You've been to a sports bar there. You've argued with a fan who's a Celtics fan. How often are you running into a San Antonio Spurs fan if you live in Philadelphia, right? So outside of just like the travel problems, which I think exist, and the idea that scheduling is already too long for these rounds, like when you have 3 games in between, or 2 or 3 days between a playoff game, don't you start to go crazy? And you're like, wait, how is this still going on?
Yeah, add a 4th day if you're going to go from
2
Phoenix
weeks,
to New York
we're
in the
resting.
first round. Yeah.
You're telling me that in the player empowerment era, that these players are going to be like, yeah, sure, we'll take the red eye to go play a playoff game across the country because we've been seeded this way, or that owners aren't going to compare about competitive fairness if you do land as a seeding, if you're Cleveland and you get to play an Eastern Conference opponent, but then Boston ends up having to play somebody out west and do all the travel. I just think there are too many logistical problems with this that until we invent teleportation and we have a real feeling of less regional rivalries mattering to these places, that this is just like only good there on paper on the board.
I think it's a cool idea for the in-season tournament. I think that's the one thing when
yes.
I look at
I agree with that.
Agree.
When every time the groups come out, I'm just like, the Raptors got to go up against Orlando again for the in-season tournament. Like, how many times is this matchup going to be a thing?
Yeah, the regional rivalry is not working there. It has never.
Or just the thing I've said with the in-season tournament is if they're going to keep it like East and West, then just keep the same divisions you play in all year. So at least people know who the hell is in the division. Or to your point, just scrap the conferences there. Use that as the testing ground or something.
Exactly. And so I think that's where, I think just looking at those matchups is fun. And so if you could just get it in the in-season tournament to keep something different and unique and have these matchups build out there, and maybe if you get something there, you get to a point where these rivalries are fun. I mean, you think back to, when the Raptors and Warriors were going back and forth at it and the way the fans were interacting on social media, like maybe there's other rivalries that can stem from that. And so I think that's maybe a good trial ground for it. And then you see what comes with it.
All right, well, we'll talk about this again when the Raptors at 28 wins have 2 games left. And it's like, if they win them both, they're in the postseason. If they lose them both, they're a top 5 pick. But let's talk about some deadline winners and losers. It's been almost a month since the deadline somehow. Where's the time gone? Which is, I think, a better time to talk winners and losers than like the day after when we haven't seen any of these new faces in the new places. The caveat was, as I had mentioned to you guys, I wanted you to pick post-deadline winners and losers that weren't the Lakers and Mavericks, because as anyone who's watched this show or as anyone who knows basketball knows, those are the most obvious winner and loser, because Luka Doncic went from one team to the other in exchange for Anthony Davis. I will say, just before I throw it to you guys for your winners and losers, on the note of the Mavericks all obviously being the biggest loser, Kyrie Irving lost for the season, tore his ACL last night. We obviously know Anthony Davis hasn't played since his debut there. And another thing I wanted to point out too that people haven't talked about enough when it comes to the Mavericks at the deadline, because obviously Luka Doncic was the biggest headline. They also traded Quentin Grimes, who was like a good young player and a terrific shooter, like one of the best pull-up shooters in the league. I think he just had 40-something points for the Sixers the other night. Yep. They traded him for Caleb Martin, because Caleb Martin's like under team control for years, whereas Grimes is going to be an RFA. They could really use Quentin Grimes right now. You cannot make up enough ways that they lost the deadline. A Nico Harrison masterclass. But yeah, and now it's been compounded by the fact Kyrie Irving out for the year. I don't want to say who would have thought, because he's actually been fairly durable as a Maverick, but in the grand scheme of things, it's like, who would have thought? You complained about Luka Doncic maybe not being available enough in the future, so you tied all of your hopes to 2 guys who probably won't be available in the present. I digress, unless you guys have more to say about the Mavericks, which you might. But JD, hit me with a winner or a loser that isn't the Lakers or Mavericks.
Okay, so I have a bunch of winners, but the first guy that comes to mind is just Dalton Connect. he doesn't have to play on the Hornets. Like the Hornets are the most unwatchable product in the NBA. Like it's really, it's horrific. And if you just look at where they are as a franchise, like I think if you're an NBA fan, you're rooting for, and you're in the tanking, right? You're rooting for Cooper Flagg to end up on your team. But the second thing you're rooting for is for him not to end up on Charlotte because it's just a graveyard for hopes. And so I can't think of anything better than Dalton Knecht going from thinking he was going to be a Charlotte Hornet and just basically standing off to the side while LaMelo does whatever he decides to do on any given night on a completely rudderless franchise and going back to the Lakers, who are suddenly way pluckier than I thought they were going to be. Like, don't you guys feel like the Lakers are a real threat after me being like so dismissive of them? And I will admit, hand up, like I hate JJ Redick. Like I just can't stand him.
I think you mentioned that last time you were on the show.
I think JJ Redick's like so much of what's wrong with basketball coverage, where it's like there's these two extremes that are bad, much like anything in life, where it's like you've got the one extreme that's like always like crapping on basketball and just saying everything's bad about it and, you know, not really being informed about the sport or the history or anything like it. It's like they just want to fly by and just drop bombs on the sport. But then you have the like nothing to see here crowd, like Chief Wiggum standing in front of the fire, just saying like, it's totally fine. It's you who's not sophisticated enough. And JJ Redick propagated that almost as poorly as anybody ever did. But the Lakers are like real scary.
No, they have LeBron James and Luka Doncic in a 7-game series. Like they have a shot to win it. They still need a big, which to your point of the Dalton Knecht trade, that wasn't. They could have got one in that trade, and they lost them.
But like Rui is good again. Like I'm watching these games, and all of a sudden Rui just like came out of some like nowhere and is brilliant. And Luka, you talk about no size. He does look like 20 pounds heavier than. I don't know if it's because he switched to purple and like the other colors.
He'll get it. He'll be like, tip-top shape on the playoffs.
He looks massive. And it's like, I don't know. There's definitely issues with what they can defend, but I look at the Lakers and I'm thinking, dude, if I was a Thunder fan, this is the matchup where I'm going, please don't let this happen to us. Like, give us the. We've seen Chet play great against Denver, right? They match up so well with like the depth there. There's something about the Lakers that are scary. And so all of a sudden it's like you went from Dalton Knecht going from, I know I went way too long on Dalton Knecht, but the greater point is just like you could have been nowhere forever to a place where it's like you're genuinely going to be on a championship contender.
And you're an early 20s millionaire pro athlete who gets to live and play in LA with LeBron
20s?
James.
I feel like he's like 27.
With LeBron James and Luka Doncic instead of having to live and play in Charlotte. No disrespect to our North Carolina
And I think
fans
the cool thing with LeBron is, you know, he's got his eyes on the prize again. Like he looks completely rejuvenated. He looks like, hey, like we can do this. Even though maybe, hey, realistically, maybe they need another move in the summer. Shout out Mark Williams, another big loser from the trade.
The opposite of Dalton Knecht.
Well, he's not even a loser because he's back in Charlotte, but everyone's like, you're broken. You know, like now there's no faith that the Lakers would take a shot at you. Who's going to do that now?
Yeah. And so, you know, he goes from thinking he's going to be catching lobs from Luka to I'm just going to, again, just watch LaMelo do whatever he wants to do any given possession.
Stand around. Like stand.
Yeah. And then on the other side of this, you know, we talk about looking rejuvenated, looking like they've got their eyes on the prize again. The Warriors getting Jimmy. You look at the way Steph Curry's playing now, drops 50 the other night, 12 threes. I think they are primed for, you know, a really strong finish to the season here. I think they could actually end up pretty close to 50 wins with the way they're playing. And that's another team where if they're matched up against Houston, against Memphis, even against OKC, I think they can give them a push. And again, the early signs of the way Jimmy is complimenting Steph, that's going to be a real problem in the postseason.
Yeah.
Are you guys surprised?
Honestly, I'm not. So I made a video for our Friday Unfiltered series, which is kind of me in a green screen, a couple months ago, pleading with the Warriors to trade for Jimmy Butler. Because I just thought, my knock on the Warriors is always like they're trying to do this 2 timelines thing. It's like, hello, the timeline only exists while Steph Curry's there. Like once he's gone, I don't care how good these young guys are, they're not going to be Steph Curry. It's while he's there that you have a sliver of hope every year to win. Go get another guy. I thought Jimmy would fit well because he moves well off the ball and around Steph. I thought it would be great. It has been. The thing where I think they're the biggest winner is at the time I was saying, forget all these young guys, trade whoever you have to trade to get Jimmy Butler. And in the end, they ended up moving Wiggins' contract, but they didn't have to move any of the young guys that they're so attached to, and they still got Jimmy.
They've still got Kuminga to come.
Yeah.
He's been out. He's been injured. And so I think the way the pieces fit now, again, the way Draymond is playing with Jimmy in the picture, I think they are as good as anyone, and OKC has the better depth. But now you go into this series again where outside of OKC, you can make the case that with Steph and Jimmy, they'll have the two best players in the series outside of maybe the Lakers.
Yeah, like I mentioned, you have Luka and LeBron in a 7-game series. You've got a chance. You got Steph and Jimmy in a 7-game series. And, Draymond, who coined the term, there are 82-game players and there are 16-game players. Yeah. Draymond's the ultimate 16-game player. Jimmy Butler, arguably, has been the best playoff performer the last few years. And you got Steph Curry. Like, again, that's another team. I know we're saying a lot of teams have a shot here. Only one can actually win. But the Warriors went from before the deadline, I don't think having
completely
any...
irrelevant.
Yeah, maybe not even making the postseason and definitely not having a chance to win the championship. They at least have a shot now, again.
I still really question their ability to get stops. Like, that is one of the differences with me when I'm, like, watching Oklahoma City play.
Yeah.
Where it's like when they lock down, you're like, holy crap, this is like...
The best defense relative to league average, I believe, in history right now.
Yeah, they're so good. And I just think about, like, all the different looks they could throw at Steph and at Jimmy. And Jimmy's what, 35?
Yeah, mid-35, and they killed him 36.
So I am a little curious to see, like, he and Steph and Draymond and how that would hold up on a deep playoff run.
Yeah.
So
Jimmy's well rested this season.
Yeah, he really is. Like, he's really...
Talk about a winner, by the way. Talk about a winner.
Yeah.
Got the money in the extension he wanted.
Got everything.
Yeah, didn't go to Phoenix. Goes to California and still goes to like a warm weather club. He doesn't have to deal.
Phoenix would be good? Like, does he think?
No, he thought wanted to go there, but I think in the end it worked out for him.
Yeah, no, it worked out perfectly. In fact, I kind of hate it because again, I'm an old school NBA fan, and so like I believe in the mythos of Pat Riley. I'm like I hated to see Riley's downfall, even though I hate the Lakers and I've never liked the Heat. Like, there's something about Pat Riley where you're like, I like the fact that there's like some still old school.
It's the aura, man.
Yeah, of course. And like I've talked to many former Heat players, and they've talked about what the differences are between the Heat and other organizations, and the professionalism they command, the rules, the fines. That some of it seems like a little hokey in the modern day NBA, but to see Jimmy just like destroy that and leave just a flaming heap behind him, and then move to Golden State, and all of a sudden he's like on the bench helping out the young guys, buying into everything, doing his like Jimmy Butler's like a stepdad who's trying to ingratiate himself with a stepmom, and then like she's gonna leave and he's gonna like just turn the TV on and ignore the kids. Like a season from now, things are gonna go poorly. He's not gonna care. I don't know. I still have the Warriors a tier down, but I will say that I guess I'm surprised at how good it's worked. Like when Jimmy first got there, I remember tuning in the first game and thinking, I wonder what he's going to be like, because they sort of need someone who is going to go to the basket and go to the foul line, and someone who's going to be like an aggressor and initiator outside of just like the Steph Draymond two-man game of like Draymond funneling Steph pass over pass over pass. And Jimmy looked a little out of place, and it looked like he was like really trying to be trepidatious in the way that he was going to try to fit into this team. And from an offensive standpoint, like whenever you watch him, it looks like he's been there for years. Yeah. He's just immediately gotten, and I guess I should have expected that as a smart basketball player, but no, I thought that this was going to move the needle 0 for me in terms of their title chances or deep playoff run chances. And I'm definitely with both you guys where I'm like, you're not thrilled that they end up against you in a series. Like you're just not anymore.
No, you're terrified, to be honest.
And the big thing the last couple of years has been the non-Steph minutes.
Yeah.
Right? And now it's those minutes where Jimmy's on the floor and he is genuinely making all those other guys around him better.
Yeah.
Right? And we talk about a floor raiser, guys like Moses Moody have suddenly looked like a different player since the trade.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the big difference now.
Can I do a couple other rapid fire winners?
Yeah, I was going to say on a much lesser note, I was going to say Cleveland, only because getting DeAndre Hunter, that's a team that's been looking for that fifth starter. They're not actually starting a fifth closer, if you'd say, for a while, that small forward to tie it all together. They got him. They've been the best team in basketball all year. What are your rapid fire?
That's one of them for me, is like he scored 30 points the other night.
Yeah.
It's like, and you see them when they're closing games, like you see him against Boston, it's like, this guy matters. Yeah. I actually had a moment where I'm watching him play going, remember that Siakam trade rumor where it was like he was involved in that? And like, I don't know. Yeah. I think I'd rather have him than Ochai Agbaji.
See, I like Ochai.
So
I think
do
he's a solid role player. The thing I'd say, too, is that I think DeAndre, I like him. He's a better player than Ochai Agbaji. But what I'd say is also helps when you just have to be the fifth guy between Garland, Mobley, Mitchell, and Allen.
They're so deep, but I love when, especially now, this is the Thunder thing. you can do multiple looks.
Yeah.
You lose somebody to foul trouble and you feel like someone else can come in off the bench and actually provide you something. And like they had Jerome, who was able to give them like an offensive lift, a bit of a different look, right? Like, and like I look at him and I just say, okay, so you can knock down a shot. You're a big body. You move terrifically laterally. You're strong as hell. And you're not leaned on at all. Like you're just a purely
you're the fifth guy.
Give us an additive look to this, and it's just an awesome fit for them. Like,
absolutely.
I actually can't believe that I should believe that it worked this well for the Cavs because everything seamlessly, like their coaching staff has been excellent all season. Again, when you don't have to walk into a situation and be the savior, you just get to walk in as the fifth, sixth guy on a roster, sure. But again, it's another one where, like, sorry, like to tie back to the Raptors thing, it's like Masai loves these distressed asset trades. And that's the part of it that I was kind of dreaming on where I was like, he was the epitome of a distressed asset and you grabbed them for nothing. And I really do think that he changes their title chances.
Yeah,
like you have them against the Boston
really
series,
ties it all
like,
together.
He was just like perfect, right on top. Excellent addition for them.
I think the other big aspect in which Cleveland has won is that no one else in the East got better in a meaningful way. Mm-hmm. When you look at Milwaukee making the deal for Kuzma, you talk about moves that move the needle zero.
It's him.
That's one of them, right? Mm-hmm. The Knicks, their defense, we've seen their record against the top six teams, top six offenses, and they are struggling in those big games. Mm-hmm. I think when you look at Boston, obviously that's the team that you look at and say, they needed a DeAndre Hunter for that matchup. And now they've got it. The comeback win over them is going to do a world of confidence for that matchup. But I think that's probably the one thing that they can look at and say, okay, you know what? No one else really got better at the trade deadline in the East.
And we did.
And we did. And now we also like our chances against Boston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who are these other rapid fire winners you got?
This one is, again, Raptor specific. Davion Mitchell.
Wow. Getting to go to Miami?
Have you... Like, again, I don't know how much Heat you guys are watching.
He's been good. He's been good.
No, like,
he's been good.
I was going to say, like, I will say that a lot of this comes from me watching this Knicks game the other night where I was watching him play, but he looks good with them. Like, he's getting minutes. He had this weird season with the Raptors where he's playing on, like, a completely defunct basketball team, essentially. He's getting weird minutes. I don't think that fans loved him more than they loved Shed, but watching him kind of be with Heat culture, and not to overextend this, but it's like, here's this gritty guard who comes in and gives them real defense. He doesn't need the ball in his hands. They're way too heliocentric with like the Tyler Hero stuff. Like I saw a stat that they've blown more double-digit leads than any team in the NBA, and I'm like, yeah, that's because they just let Tyler Hero shoot them in and
who is having an incredible season.
For sure, but I'm just saying that when he's shooting pull-up threes all game long, when eventually some of them will go in and you're protecting a lead, that's not going to be the best offense for you. But like, the thing that I've noticed from his game and the select viewings that I've seen is that there's more of a distributor there than I realized with the Raptors. Like, he did not get to play around like a same group of guys. And I'm just sort of looking at him now and saying, I don't know. Not that the Raptors misidentified him. He was not a fit here whatsoever, but like, he just looks like a guy in the league that is going to be able to have a career, and I like him. I think that he won by getting to go there.
Even if you looked at him as a bit of a misfit with the Raptors, he was winning all his minutes. He was one of the best plus-minus guys on the team.
I think he's a great point of attack
no
defender.
question about
he can
that.
make a pass. The thing is, he turns it over too much, and he's so bad as a shooter and as an individual scorer that it's going to be hard for him to ever be more than like a consistent backup big, and that's where it's like, they've got the younger Shed who they believe in more. I guess they see it. What I even saw it that way too. I'm like, okay, if this guy's just going to be a career backup, which is what his offensive limitations mean, and you've got a guy in Shed who could probably just be a solid rotation backup for the next 5 to 10 years, go with the guy who's like on a very cheap rookie scale.
No, it made sense for the Raptors. I don't think that they like screwed something up. And like, again, I'm not taking the sample that we're seeing him from him right now and going, like, what a calamity that they had this guy in the building and they let him go. But I'm like, he just sort of looks like a guy who seemed as though, not that he could be like out of the NBA, but that he could just not be a rotation guy that you wouldn't even think about. But then these minutes in Miami, like what I'm seeing down there, where I'm like, they're going to get that play-in spot. Like, they're going to be what? Maybe the 7 seed? Yeah. And he, on that team, matters.
In the East, they might have clinched the play-on spot already.
He matters on that team. And I'm like, damn, okay, like, good for you. You actually got a better opportunity somehow than the one that was presented to you with Toronto despite the Quickly injury.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay.
Yeah,
something.
he'll play some meaningful minutes at least. Any rapid fire losers?
I mean, I don't think we can, finish this segment without talking about the Suns.
Yeah, that's it. That's all I have. Is the
Oh,
number one loser.
I went hard on the Suns last week. Yeah, got an episode of Unfiltered on Friday coming out on the Suns, but please, yeah.
I mean, when you look at from the time trade rumors began, it was about them doing something. It was about them getting Jimmy, and it was about them finding a way to move Bradley Beal. Obviously, they end up doing nothing. They get Nick Richards, who, again, not moving the needle. And now you're in this situation where Dallas might, back their way out of the playoffs, and Phoenix is just kind of going through the motions. And a Kevin Durant trade seems inevitable now in the summer. And you just wonder, there was the graphic the other day, about what the Suns were before the Bradley Beal deal. And you look at that DeAndre Ayton and Chris Paul and them actually looking pretty good. And you think about where they are now and the mess that they've created for themselves. It's unfortunate for Suns fans that they're in this position. And now everything has kind of blown up in the franchise's face. Everything has kind of blown up in Kevin Durant's face. And I think the way these last 5-6 years have played out, pretty much since joining Brooklyn, it's kind of a turning point in KD's legacy, I do feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a bad look for him for 6 years now, like ever since he left Golden State. I mean, he had a great year in Brooklyn, almost dragged them past Milwaukee, if not for that toe. But yeah, I mean, it's been downhill for him from a team success perspective, and it's going to continue to be like that until and unless the Suns trade him, which should happen this summer.
Yeah, but that's basketball. Is like if you have great individual success but zero team, and you're that like in that
it's going to be held against
player, it's like none of this matters.
Yeah.
And this is some of the thing that drives me crazy about Kevin Durant doing all the like Twitter stuff. Like I'm not bothered by Durant sticking up for himself in moments. Like it doesn't faze me one way or the other. Like I'm not like, this is why this guy doesn't get it. But the one thing that does drive me a little crazy when he's like, oh, go watch hockey then. Like, why isn't anybody celebrating me? Oh, it's all my fault. It's like, bro, you left the Warriors. You made this team in Brooklyn that didn't work at all. It was a disaster. Like a disaster. You get out, you go to another situation, and they get unquestionably worse with you there.
And become a disaster.
And what are we supposed to do? Like, just be like, guys, you seen Kevin Durant's like field goal percentage? Like, I don't care. Yeah. Make it work. That's supposed to be who you are. I know you're older, but to your point about the legacy, like, I think that we can try to like whittle this down a little bit. Like, who's the greatest loser of the Suns, right? Obviously, their fans are suffering more than anybody because, like, I don't think they control their draft pick till we die.
2032, and that pick's going to be frozen because they're over the second.
Like, if I outlive the Suns getting their pick, if I see that happen again, I'm going to be like, I lived a long life. Yeah. I'm okay. Like, I'm ready to go whenever beyond this point. I think the biggest loser, like, specifically to the Suns, is exactly what you're talking about. Like, Kevin Durant, throughout my life, has been one of the most enjoyable players ever. Like, I think that there's been some stuff with being misunderstood. I hated the Golden State move just from the standpoint of like the optics of going and joining the team that just beat you. But I also understood it like, man, if you played with Russell Westbrook, you would be, and you had the option to go to this like selfish basketball with Kerr and the Warriors and this idealistic thing. Like, he miscalculated it, but ultimately it was not as bad on paper as I thought, some people made it out to be. The rest of his career since that point has just been like a nail in the coffin indictment of what he has been as a player. And it's like, where do you put him amongst the all-time greats? Because if you ask me, out of everybody you've ever seen, your life's on the line, you need one basket, I would still choose prime Kevin Durant. And yet, I still feel like if I was building a basketball team and I needed to win a championship, I would have at least 20 guys ahead of him. Which is the weirdest, most complicated legacy of a like modern day player that wasn't like involved in an actual controversy that I can think of.
Yeah, and we'll literally get to have this conversation again next year when he's on another team or another Denver, and we'll see whether that.
But that's like that point. It's like, where do you want him? Like, what organization is like excited about it? What fan base is like?
I think Houston would still want him. I feel like,
but I don't want him there if I'm Houston.
You know who I want in Houston? Again, watch this Friday's episode of Unfiltered. Devin Booker.
Yeah, I like that too. Yeah, that's good. But
that would be awesome.
But that's the thing too. It's like if you're a Suns fans, you're going to lose Devin Booker because Kevin Durant came here?
because of everything they've done, especially the Beal trade. Like, it's a disaster. Couple other quick losers. I've got Sacramento turning Fox into Levine and other stuff. Like, I know they had to move Fox, but the return was fine. It wasn't as bad as the Chicago end of that deal, but I think they're a loser just because all the excitement and all the positive vibes of a couple of years ago faded away. They're kind of back to being the Kings.
They are.
And they're just going to be, at best, like a play-in team. And there's something depressing about that, given that it felt like they had finally broken through. And that Milwaukee, they won in the fact that they got under the second apron, but I still think they're a loser in getting Kuzma in there instead of Middleton. Like, I get it. Middleton's probably never going to be the same, the money, but I still think Middleton at his best, when he's at his best, gives them a chance to win on a very small level, but still gives them a chance. I don't think they have a chance with Kuzma in there now. And I think if you're going to be spending what they're spending and you're trying to maximize however long you've got Giannis left, I get the money-saving part of it, but like Middleton to Kuzma, that's a lose for me.
Did either of you guys get to sit down with DeMar when he did the book?
I didn't. I wasn't in town, but I heard he was great.
Yeah, so I got lucky enough to meet him and sit down and kind of go over it. And it's just like, I've always been a big DeRozan fan. Like, I felt like even though there's this revisionist history with Raptors fans, that he was, I don't want to say unfairly treated by fans, because that's certainly not the case, but like, I do think that he was underappreciated at times here in Toronto, especially for like the ancillary things of like buying into Toronto and truly like embracing the city more so than even like Kyle Lowry gets credit for. It's like Kyle Lowry wanted out of here for a while. Like DeRozan never had that. Like he never once was like, well, I don't know. It's like he was here.
At a time when the franchise really needed that.
Exactly. Like, and just felt like he got better every offseason. Like he really worked on his game. He grew as a player. It was like every year. We always overstated the defense thing. Like there'd be like one preseason game where you get a steal. And we're like, man, he really worked on it. And then you get it.
It's like a 3-point shot. He would also make one 3-point shot and then not hit another one.
Yeah, 3-point shot in that one. We're always thinking. But so it's like, I've always rooted for DeMar. And I've always like wanted to see his team have success. And I actually have a bone to pick with you because I saw on Instagram on the Scores page where it was like this DeRozan Hall of Famer thing, and I'm like,
no brainer Hall of Famer.
No brainer, not a Hall of Famer.
Dude, that basketball Hall of Fame. Look at the guys in there.
I know. I
25,000 points. 6-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA, gold medalist. He's going to the Hall of Fame.
Gold medalist in basketball.
No,
is
I
like
think here's why I think, because I've heard this argument before where it's like, oh, if you're American, it shouldn't count. But here's why I think it should count. Here's why I think it should count. Because even to be a gold medalist as an American, that means you still had to make that Team USA team. And to make Team USA is a lot different than...
like, he wasn't the guy. Like, he wasn't
the guy, but I'm just saying, when you put that resume together, given what the standards for the Basketball Hall of Fame are, how do you keep him out? Unless you're going to go in and like kick 80 other guys out.
Here's how I can keep him out. Very simply. I've watched basketball my whole life. I've never once felt like DeMar DeRozan was a top 10 player in the NBA.
Did you ever think Mitch Richmond was a top 10 player?
No, and that's the problem. It's like, should the NBA Hall of Fame be punished in perpetuity because they made a mistake with Mitch Richmond?
Yes.
So it's like
that's another guy.
Sure, but Mitch is the worst one. Like it is really and I hate doing it because it's like one of my early loves of basketball was like the Warriors. Like I had an uncle who lived in the Bay Area. He had seasons tickets to the Warriors, so it was like I grew up on like Chris Mullin and Mitch Richmond and Hardaway. It was like, okay, so like that was one of my first loves. I loved those uniforms. It's great, but yeah, he shouldn't have got in. It's crazy that he got in. Like, he was like a 20-point-a-game guy who was not ever really the best player on his team. But I feel the way with DeRozan. Like, as much as I loved DeMar, and I still really do care about his game, and I think like he's this unique player, he's this awesome personality, he has done things that are outside of the game that genuinely matter. I never once was like, God, one of the 15 best guys in the NBA. Even when he's made the All-NBA teams, I was like, okay, he deserves the third-ish team, I guess so. And like water.
You do that a few times. That's a basketball. Hall of Fame.
I like at some point to me, like a Hall of Famer. You're right in the world that they've created for themselves. Absolutely, but like
if we were going baseball standards, no, he's not. Not even
like
close. But
it's like
this is a don't hate the player, hate the game situation.
But exactly. Like, change the game a little bit here, like a little like. I'm gonna get hate from because I know Rajasthan's watch this. Like, I don't think Lowry's a Hall of Famer.
They're both Hall of Fame.
And they are, for sure, by the letter of this law. And I am as big of a Lowry fan as anybody, except for this, where it's like, I want the Hall of Fames to matter. It should be guys who are like, were you one of the best 10 players of your era? Like,
you think you're heated now. 2 months from now, we just wait till JJ Redick finishes top 3 in Coach of the Year voting. Then we'll get.
If honestly, like this is the most disastrous thing. Like the Pistons, it's the Cavs, and then JJ Redick's gonna get this like LA love. Like,
listen, he's done a decent job pulling that thing together.
The fact that they're good defensively is like, God damn it, that's JJ Redick.
No, I think he's got something there. Okay, I'm gonna use the JJ and the Lakers thing to seg to our last segment because it's a little bit of Luka talk.
Okay.
In that. So a month ago, the deal goes down. I do a whole episode, obviously, about how stupid the Mavs are. How could they only negotiate with the Lakers? And if they are like, how could they trade him for AD if they're even going to trade him at all? Report comes out last week that the Lakers actually reached out to Minnesota first about a Luka for Ant trade. Luka Doncic for Anthony Edwards. The Timberwolves rejected them. The Lakers then move on to straight up targeting AD and not negotiating with anyone else. So my question for both of you is. We're all in agreement the Mavs completely fumbled this. They botched it. They've ruined their franchise for years because of it. But would it have been acceptable to you if we were actually sitting here right now talking about the fact that they gave up on Luka Doncic, but they got Anthony Edwards out of it?
I think it's a fundamentally different equation because the whole argument with Anthony Davis is you're getting a guy who is injury prone, who's on the tail end of his prime, who you can't see a long-term future with. And so with Anthony Edwards, you get a guy who can be the face of the franchise for a long time, has the face of the league type status.
Doesn't want it.
Doesn't want
it.
And so that would be a much easier sell. Now, I will take a bit of a different spin on this, and I will say if that trade were to happen, I think there would need to be an investigation and some sort of appeal from the NBPA on whether owners are colluding to avoid paying the Supermax. And so they're just dealing these guys and saying, hey, we'll trade these guys and we'll avoid the $350 million. And,
that's a real NBA guy take right there. Like, that's a deep cut thought. That's where your brain first goes to. I love that.
Yeah, because then neither would be qualified for it because they wouldn't be playing for their original team or still had been traded on the rookie scale contract. Yeah, it would work out perfectly where neither guy would ever be able to sign the full Supermax.
Yeah, and so I think that would be a bigger conversation that would stem if that were to happen. But in terms of just the on-court optics of it, I think that was the type of deal that would have made sense. The only guy the only types of players you really realistically should have been trading Doncic for were Anthony Edwards, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That's it.
Not even Giannis, I'd say, just because of the age. That's because
fair.
of right now,
that's
because
fair.
of the age. And
that's fair.
And that's what was so crazy about it. But yeah, if it's Ant, that's a different story. Because at least, listen, I think Luka Doncic is better than Anthony Edwards, and I think we're going to have this conversation to end the show about who you'd rather have going forward. But like the difference is, at least Ant, he's a young superstar. And you can use some of the things you use, like the arguments they used against Luka are supposedly used behind the scenes of like, we're upset about him never being in shape. We're worried about his condition. We think it might lead to catastrophic injury in the next few years. Those things I can at least understand and support them moving him if it ends up with Anthony Edwards coming back the other way. I can't ever buy any of that BS when you ended up trading for a much older, even more injury-prone guy who ended up getting hurt his first game with you.
Yeah.
If it's Anthony Edwards, then I could have said, listen, you know what, Nico Harrison? I wouldn't have done it. I would not have moved Luka Doncic because he's managed to play through all that stuff and be, at worst, a top 5 player in the world for the last friggin' 3 to 5 years. But I can understand why you did it if you felt that way, and you still ended up with a legit franchise star still approaching his prime.
So there's like a rule in the NBA called like the Stepien rule, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, because you can't be too stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you got so stupid that they were like, okay, stupid guy, we have to change the rules for you, and it's not up to you. We're actually taking this out of your hands.
Yeah, Stepien rule, just in case anyone out there doesn't know, is that you can't trade, you can't be without a first-round draft pick in 2 straight years. So if you trade your 2027 pick, in 2028, you can only swap it. You can't trade it out.
If you read our friend Alex Wong's book, you also realize that guy could have been the Raptors owner.
Yeah, the Cavs guy.
He was almost
just trading all the picks.
That stupid idiot was almost running everything here. So you have that, and then I think from a modern standpoint, to like make this closer in timelines, There was like this moment after the Rudy Gobert trade where all these teams wanted this like crazy package for everything, right? And I think Masai got trapped in that actually a little bit with when they needed to sell their pieces. They were like, well, if Rudy Gobert got this, like OG has to get this. And then all of a sudden guys got kicked down the road too much and the rest of the league was like, okay, that was really stupid what Minnesota did. Like you can't get any stupider than that. So the league sort of normalized a little bit, right? This is now the stupidest trade that we will ever see. Like, it 100%. Might not go down as, like, the worst. Like, who knows? Maybe the Mavericks find a way to win. I don't know. Maybe Luka does get so fat he can't play. Like, I don't know. Like, we'll see. But there's just no doubt in my mind that this is the dumbest move that we've ever seen. And I think it's going to be impossible to top. Obviously, if you got Anthony Edwards, you can feel fine about it. What I will say, though, is if I was a Timberwolves fan and that was offered to me, if you told me that Luka was going to sign an extension, I would take Luka over Ant. The problem is that you play in Minnesota.
Exactly.
And Luka Doncic now does not have that Supermax eligibility. And so to go there, if you're Minnesota, like, of course you have to say no because it's a devil we know versus a devil we don't.
With Ant under contract through like 2028 or 2029.
Yeah, you bring in Luka, you're essentially saying we think we have to win this year. Like this year, we feel like the West is wide open. And if we bring in Luka with this gang of players, that this is going to work out. I think the Timberwolves are like in a sneaky, weird spot with him where I don't know what the future holds, like whether he will be okay to just stay there for the entirety of his career. I think that we made all these assumptions about Anthony Edwards on that playoff run. Like, oh my God, this guy is going to be one of the face of the NBA. Like, is he Michael Jordan's child? You know, like, yeah, we really bought into this guy. And then this year, it's like, it's been bad. It was like, I'm going to take a lot of bad shots. I'm going to stop going to the basket. I don't want to do anything that's extra from the team obligations. I don't want to be the face of the league. He's kind of like, I like it when guys are candid, but some of the ways that he's called out his teammates this year through the press has not been exactly great. Like whenever I see Anthony Edwards like lean back in that chair, it's like a screenshot.
Great for content.
I'm like, great. Oh boy.
Great for content, great for our jobs. Like, maybe not if you're a Timberwolf.
Yeah, like where is this going? And I just look at them this year and I'm like, this trade could not have gone worse. The team does not have, to me, even close to a championship ceiling this season. And I think that he has regressed as a player. I'm certainly not writing him off, but like if you're going to ask me, like, what is the more certainty over the next 5 years in terms of like a guy that is going to carry his team to a title and can work around him, like Luke is the bet. So I again, if you told me they really felt confident they'd be able to bring him back, I'd do that trade 1-for-1, no questions asked.
Yeah. And with respect to the Wolves, too, like they took the wind out of their sails with the Cat trade.
Yep.
Agreed, Ant isn't quite what he was last year. He's a better shooter, but I don't think he's quite the overall player.
He better be. He shoots a billion times. Like.
But I agree that even though I think it would have been a more acceptable result from Dallas's perspective, obviously, if you get Anthony Edwards instead of Anthony Davis, I still, if I'm the Timberwolves, would have said yes to that deal if I can get Luka long term. The problem is you don't know that, and so I get why they rejected it.
Sure.
But the last question for you, and I know you've kind of already answered it.
Yeah.
You mentioned some of the concerns with Ant. I mean, he also leads the league in technicals this year. Yeah. Just got suspended for his 16th tackle. Also didn't leave the court in timely fashion. Threw the ball in the crowd. So got $35K fine, which I believe takes his like fines for the year up to $320,000 or something. Some problems there. Mm-hmm. Having said all that, Vivek, I'll ask you, right now, you're a GM. I won't say you're Nico Harrison because no one wants that. I won't put that on you. But you're a general manager. You have a choice to build your future for the next 5+ years around Luka Doncic or Anthony Edwards. Can only have one, but it has to be one of those two guys. Knowing everything you know about each, and concerns included, who are you taking?
Man, that is a tough question.
And contracts not included. So, like, you can't say, oh, well, I'll take Ant because he's under contract for 4 years, where Luka, I don't know. It's just straight up, who would you rather have going forward?
Yeah, I think I am probably going with Luka just because I know for sure, like, the offense is in such good hands, whereas maybe with Ant, you still have to put the right pieces around him. Even now this season, we talk about him taking all these threes. I think part of that is because Cat's no longer there. I think the spacing is an issue. And I think there's maybe an element of team building that's easier with Luka that I don't see at the same level with Ant. Even though Ant is obviously the better defender, I think they both have that clutch gene and then have that factor about them. But I will probably, go with Luka by a hair.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to be unanimous. I would have liked for them to have been some debate in this, but I have to as well. Like, I can understand all the reasons why someone would prefer Ant. I really do. I do get, like I said, I don't even hate on Nico Harrison for the concerns he had about Luka's future. It's how they went about moving him, the decision to move him in general, all that. But I get all the concerns. So I can understand why someone might go with Ant. But I also think with Ant, it's not like we're talking about Wemby here. Like, when he's healthy, he's flawless, right? Like, every player has flaws.
It's been a recalibration.
Yeah.
It's been a recalibration.
Every player has flaws, pretty much. Like I said, unless you're thinking of like what Wemby will be at his peak if he's healthy, every player, every star, even superstars have flaws. And Luka comes with some too, but Luka Doncic, in his first 6 years, was an All-NBA first teamer 5 times. Not just All-NBA, like you talked about, DeMar at his best, was like maybe a third. No. Luka Doncic, for 5 of his first 6 years, was a top 5 player on the planet and dragged a team to the finals.
Yeah.
Just last June. While the Mavericks were saying, he's not in the best shape. So I still say, give me that guy.
Bro, like you said, it's close. I don't even think it's close. Like, it's just Luka by like a sizable gap for me. And like, there's just a couple reasons. One, like, a lot of fellas don't want to hear this, but like, size matters. Yeah. And you just look at Luka when it's like the ability, like the matchup problems that he presents to teams. Like, there's that little play in that Mavs game where LeBron and him are like passing it back and forth with one another, and he's posting up, and you're seeing like, who's supposed to defend him when he gets in that spot? 2 people.
One of the only guys I can remember, vividly remember, seeing moving Kawhi in the post in his rookie year.
Dude, he's like I know we're joking about his weight and stuff, but it's like, he's a big dude.
Yeah.
Like, he is huge. And like, the defense is always going to be terrible. Like, honestly, like, I'm sure there's going to be still the moments, and we always do this where we parse with guys like the DeRozan conversation where it's like, oh, he's trying more. But for the most part, it's like, you see a lot of flat-footed Luka where he's like trying to reach and he gets a foul and then he screams and cries at the ref that he didn't do a foul, when it's like, no, man, you were helpless, and that's the case.
Yeah.
I don't think that Edwards' defense is like so great that it would begin to change the conversation of like what the ceiling is when both guys are on. Like, Ant had an amazing playoff run. I think he has shown quite clearly that he can be one of the best players in the league. But genuinely, every example of Luka Doncic that we have on a basketball court is like a higher level than all of what we saw from Ant outside of that like tiny body of work. So you factor in like the size, the fact that they're not that dissimilar in age, the amount of basketball that Luka has played, if you consider his like European pro stuff, and the way that he just sees the floor and like the passes that he makes, like, just even the size and the things that he sees on the floor, like the creativity with some of the ways that he finds open guys is like, it's stupid. So that's, again, this is why it makes me so mad the Mavericks traded this guy. It's like, how could you trade someone that might end up going down genuinely as, like I mentioned Kevin Durant being the greatest scorer that I've ever seen. Like, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility at the very end of Luka's career where like, yeah, that was the greatest offensive player of all time.
I mean, he's got, I believe he is second or third only to MJ and Wilt in career scoring average.
Yeah.
And second only to MJ in career playoff scoring average.
Yeah.
Like, it's not crazy to say.
Yeah, it's just not. It's like, he's there. He's in that tier of player. And for Ant to get there, it would take a lot.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're in agreement that even the Mavs' first choice was still a terrible choice. Well, I'm sure that over the next few
Max
months,
Christie looks good though.
I'll find plenty of reasons to continue hating on Nico Harrison and the Mavs over the next few months and probably years. Fellas, appreciate you both coming in to spend time with us. Let the people know where they can find your stuff.
JD Bunkis Podcast, at JD Bunkis on Twitter and Instagram.
And for hockey fans out there, make sure you're listening to Leafs Talk.
After every game.
Yeah, Raptors and 7 Substack and Sportsnet.
All right. For JD Bunkis, for Vivek Jacob, my name is Joseph Casciaro. This has been The Unfiltered Show. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you all next time.